The most awkward moment at the beginning of a relationship. We met on a dating app. Nothing unusual, texting, jokes, voice messages, long late-night conversations. It didn't feel serious, but it wasn't empty either. Just easy. She lived in another city. Not too far, but far enough that meeting required effort. After a couple of weeks of chatting, she said she'd like to meet. For some reason, I agreed immediately. During our conversations, she occasionally mentioned her ex. Not complaining, not venting, just casually. Things like, he liked this place, or we used to go there a lot. It sounded strange, but so calm, as if it was completely normal. I didn't comment. I assumed it was just an awkward habit. I traveled to her city for the weekend. When we met, everything felt fine, even better than expected. She was exactly like she'd been online. On the first day, we walked around the city. And almost every time we passed a place, she added something like, he liked sitting here. He always wanted to go there. They used to get coffee here. I nodded, not knowing what to do with that information. It felt like I wasn't walking through a city. I was walking through someone else's memories. On the second day, she suggested going to a cafe she liked. I agreed. As we approached, she casually said, by the way, he used to come here too. It took me a second to realize who he was. We went inside. I was just taking off my jacket when I noticed a guy sitting by the window. She looked in the same direction, stopped, and smiled. It was her ex. I knew immediately. The way she straightened up, the way her expression changed, the way she walked straight over to him. She greeted him. He stood up. They hugged. Not quickly, not politely, but the kind of hug you don't give someone you're fully done with. I stood a few steps away, genuinely shocked, feeling like my eyes were about to pop out of my head. They talked for a bit. Laughed. She touched his shoulder. He asked how she'd been. She said everything was good. No one acknowledged me. When she finally turned around, she introduced me like I was just someone she knew, not a guy who had traveled from another city to see her. We sat at the table, the three of us. It was the most awkward coffee of my life. I sat there realizing that none of this felt random anymore. All those mentions, all those he liked this. And now here he was, sitting right across from me. When he left, she acted like nothing unusual had happened. Said the world was small and that it was actually kind of funny. I didn't think it was. I went home feeling like I'd accidentally walked into someone else's story, one where I was never meant to be more than a background character. That was the most absurd and awkward beginning of a relationship I've ever experienced. Not because she hugged her ex, but because I realized I'd been a spectator the whole time. She invited me over to her place. She warned me her parents would be home, but said it so casually that it didn't sound like a problem at all. We hadn't been dating long, and meeting parents felt way too serious for that stage. But everything went surprisingly well. We had dinner together, talked, joked. Her parents were friendly, relaxed, even funny. I finally relaxed. Later in the evening, we went to her room. Just to talk a bit, maybe watch something before sleeping. The house slowly went quiet. It felt like the most stressful part was already behind me. Then a storm started. Strong wind, heavy rain, and suddenly, click, the power went out in the entire house. No one panicked. Apparently, it happened sometimes. Her parents said they were going to sleep and wished us good night. Everything still felt calm and almost cozy. After a while, I needed to use the bathroom. I quietly asked her if it was okay. She quietly said yes. Her parents were already asleep. I could go. The house was almost completely dark. Only a bit of light from the window. I decided not to use my phone flashlight, so I wouldn't wake anyone. I made it to the bathroom without any issues. Did everything as quietly as possible, like someone in a stranger's house for the first time. On my way back, I confidently turned the wrong way. In the darkness, all the hallways looked the same. I was sure I knew which door was hers. I gently opened it and walked in. The room was dark. I closed the door, took a couple of steps, and quietly got into bed. That's when I realized something was very wrong. The bed was wider. The blanket felt different. And there were clearly two people lying next to me. Someone moved. I froze. Then the light turned on. I was lying in her parents' bed. For a few seconds, we just stared at each other. Them, awake and confused. Me, screaming internally. Her father was the first to laugh. Then her mother. It wasn't angry laughter. It was genuine, the kind that happens when a situation is so ridiculous that laughing is the only option. I tried to say something, but my words didn't work. I mumbled an apology and practically jumped out of the bed. At that moment, she ran into the room. She saw me, saw her parents, and started laughing so hard she had to lean against the doorframe. Everyone was laughing, except me. My face was burning, and I was convinced I'd never experienced this level of awkwardness before. After a few minutes, the laughter calmed down. Her parents joked that this was definitely a first meeting they would never forget. I apologized again and finally found the correct room. Lying in her bed, staring at the ceiling, I was sure this was the end. That after something like this, people just disappear from each other's lives. But the next morning, this story was told again at breakfast. And everyone laughed again. That's when I realized, the most awkward moments aren't the ones that ruin everything. They're the ones people end up remembering with a smile. We had been talking online for almost a month. Messages, voice notes, jokes. Everything felt easy. She lived in another city, and eventually we decided to meet. I came to see her for the weekend. It was our first time meeting in person, so I was nervous, even though I tried not to show it. She picked me up at the station, and at first, everything felt fine, even comfortable, like we'd known each other longer than we actually had. That evening, she suggested staying in. No restaurants. No plans. I agreed. We talked, ate, laughed. Her apartment was small and cozy. At some point, I noticed a lot of photos. Normal ones, family stuff, but on many of them, the same guy kept appearing. I didn't ask. She mentioned him too, casually. Things like, he used to put the mugs this way, or he liked this show too. I pretended not to notice. Late at night, she suggested going to bed. Said I could sleep there and she'd lie next to me. It sounded normal. We turned off the lights. As I lay there, trying to fall asleep, I realized something strange. The pillow smelled like another man's cologne. Not faintly, not slightly, like someone had just been there. I turned, hoping it was my imagination. That's when she quietly said she forgot to mention something. She had recently broken up, and he still sometimes came by to pick up his things. Sometimes. Before I could respond, I heard the front door open. A real sound. Clear. We both froze. A male voice came from the hallway, calm and confident, asking if he'd left his charger here. I was sitting in the dark, in a stranger's city, in a stranger's bed that clearly hadn't been empty a few hours earlier, trying to figure out who I even was in this situation. She jumped up and went into the hallway. They talked normally, casually, like there wasn't a guy from another city sitting in her bedroom. Then he walked in. He saw me. I saw him. We stared at each other in silence. She said something like, he came to visit. Not my boyfriend. Not a guest. Just him. The ex smirked and said he didn't know she had company. I didn't want to disappear. I wanted to teleport. He grabbed the charger and left, as if this was completely normal. We were left in silence. I sat on the edge of the bed and realized this might be the most awkward beginning of a relationship imaginable. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just so strange and uncomfortable that words stopped working. We met online and talked for quite a while before deciding to meet. Nothing intense. No promises. Just calm, normal conversations. That's why I assumed meeting in person would also be normal. I traveled to her city. Not just for a few hours. I stayed overnight. We had agreed I'd stay at her place because it was easier and no big deal. The first few hours were great. We walked around, talked, laughed. I started thinking I'd worried for nothing. That evening, we went back to her place. She suggested ordering food and watching a movie. The safest plan imaginable. While we were waiting for the delivery, she went to take a shower and said I could pick a movie. I sat on the couch with the remote, scrolling. That's when I noticed something odd. There were two identical mugs on the shelf near the TV. One clean, the other with coffee still inside. Warm. We'd only been back for about 20 minutes. I told myself it was none of my business. The food arrived. We ate, started the movie. Everything seemed fine, but the strange feeling didn't go away. Her phone kept vibrating. She never picked it up, just glanced at the screen and turned it face down. I pretended not to notice. Early on, everyone has loose ends. I didn't want to be that guy who overreacts too soon. Later, she said she was tired and suggested we go to bed. She said I could lie down next to her. We turned off the lights. About 10 minutes later, I heard keys in the lock. Not far away. Not neighbors. Inside this apartment. I opened my eyes and realized she was awake too. We stayed silent. The door opened. The hallway light came on. Footsteps. Someone taking off shoes. Calmly, confidently, like someone who knows exactly where they are. I stared at the ceiling, trying to figure out what I'd do if someone walked into the room. He did. A guy. Calm. Not surprised. He looked at her first, then at me. Held his gaze for a second, as if trying to remember where he'd seen me before. She said something like, "You're earlier than I expected." He nodded. Asked who I was. She hesitated. Just for a moment. Then said I was a friend who came from another city. I didn't know which part of that sentence hurt the most. The guy said, "Okay," and sat on the edge of the bed. Right next to us. No raised voices. No arguments. No urgency. He started asking her about her day. She answered. I lay there like a piece of furniture. Then he asked how long I was staying. I answered honestly. He nodded and said maybe he should stay with a friend instead. He got dressed and left. Everything about it was so casual that it made the situation even more awkward. When the door closed, we sat in silence. She said she hadn't had time to explain the situation. that things were not that simple, that he just came to pick up some things. I didn't ask anything, because by then, the awkwardness had reached a level where questions didn't matter anymore. I just knew it was the strangest night I'd ever experienced at the beginning of a relationship. Not because there was another guy, but because no one seemed surprised that I was there. She came over to my place for the first time, and that alone should have switched my brain into full attention mode. It didn't. We were sitting in the kitchen, drinking tea, talking. Everything felt calm, slightly awkward in that early dating way, but good. Then my friend called. I looked at the screen and said the most careless sentence possible, that I'd step away for just a minute. I didn't clarify. I didn't think. I just stood up and walked away. I answered the call in the hallway and immediately got pulled into the conversation. My friend started talking about something long, messy, unnecessary. Nothing urgent, nothing important. But I listened, reacted, joked. 2 minutes passed unnoticed. Then more. I caught myself walking around the apartment while talking, sitting down, standing up, leaning against the wall. I was speaking loudly, confidently, like I was alone. And that was the worst part. It didn't even cross my mind that someone was sitting in my kitchen, waiting. I completely lost touch with reality. The conversation kept going. One topic turned into another. I was laughing, getting involved, arguing. At some point, I vaguely thought the call was taking too long, but decided I'd end it later. I don't know exactly how much time passed. Then I heard the front door slam. Sharp, clear, impossible to mistake. I froze, and everything snapped back at once, like cold water. I rushed out of the call without even saying goodbye and ran back into the kitchen. It was empty. Her cup was still on the table. The chair was pushed back. Her jacket was gone. I ran into the hallway, down the stairs, skipping steps. When I got outside, I saw her getting into a taxi. I called out her name. She turned around, looked at me. No anger, no tears, just tired. The car door closed. The taxi drove off. And I stood there in the middle of the street, finally realizing what I had done. I promised a minute. I disappeared for 40, and somehow managed to forget there was a person waiting for me in my own apartment. I texted her immediately. Then again. Then I called. The messages didn't go through. The number was unavailable. She had blocked me. That's when the awkwardness stopped being just awkward. I felt like a complete idiot. Not because the call was long, but because it never even crossed my mind to hang up for the person who was sitting there, waiting. Since then, I never say just a minute. Because sometimes 1 minute is enough to ruin everything. It wasn't the best period of my life. I lived alone, barely talked to anyone, and every evening looked the same. Work, home, silence. A phone with no notifications. At some point, I just wanted someone else's presence. Not a long conversation. Not a relationship. Not a story. Just a human being nearby, even for an hour. So I did something people usually don't talk about. I called a girl for an hour. No romance. No illusions. I knew exactly why and what I was doing. I wasn't proud of it, but I didn't see it as tragic either. It was supposed to be neutral. Simple. I waited. When the doorbell rang, I was ready. Calm. Almost relieved, like the evening was finally starting. I opened the door, and my brain shut down completely. Standing there was my sister. Not someone who looked like her. Not someone similar. My actual sister. Bag over her shoulder. Jacket on. That familiar look I'd known my whole life. We stared at each other for a few seconds. In silence. She looked at the apartment number. Then at me. Then back at the number. And in that moment, we both understood everything. She didn't ask a single question. I didn't say a word. The silence wasn't loud. It was heavy. Thick. I took a step back. She did too. Quietly, she said there must have been a mistake. I nodded. No excuses. No explanations. No attempt to fix anything. She turned around and left. The door closed. I stood there in the hallway, not knowing where to look or what to feel. I wasn't ashamed of what I tried to do. I was overwhelmed by the absurdity of the coincidence. Later, she sent a short message. No anger. No emotion. Just that things like this happen, and we should pretend it never did. We both did. But from that moment on, I understood something. Sometimes the most awkward moments aren't loud or dramatic. They're quiet, when everything becomes clear instantly and forever. We had just started dating. Everything was careful, almost official. That stage where you haven't discussed who pays yet, but both of you are hoping the other one will handle it right. We went to a cafe. Not fancy, not cheap, just a normal place. I checked the menu beforehand, looked at the prices, felt calm. We sat down, ordered. The conversation flowed easily. I felt like everything was under control. And that's when I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. I didn't take it out right away. I already knew what it was, a bank notification. I knew that feeling too well. I checked it anyway, and realized my card wasn't working. Not low balance. A full technical block. I put the phone away so fast it was like it might explode. I kept smiling, nodding, joking. Inside, panic. I started running through options in my head. Ask her to pay? Say I'll step outside and fix it? Pretend I forgot my wallet? None of them worked. The waiter brought the bill and gently placed it right in the middle of the table and looked at me. I picked up the receipt. Confidently. Too confidently. Said I'd take care of it. Pulled out my card. Handed it over. The waiter walked away. About 15 seconds later, he came back. Quietly said the payment didn't go through. I nodded. Said I'd try another card. Even though I didn't have another one. I reached into my wallet anyway. Slowly. Seriously. And that's when she said that she could pay if I was having trouble. She said it calmly. No judgment. Even kindly. And that was the hardest part. Because I realized I didn't lose because of money. I lost because of the silence. She paid the bill. We walked outside. She didn't act like nothing happened. But she didn't comment either. And I walked next to her thinking this was both the funniest and the most awkward moment at the same time. Not because I didn't have money, but because I tried so hard to look confident that I ended up looking completely strange. Later, she texted saying the evening was fine. I didn't believe it. And every time I hear a bank notification sound now, I remember that bill on the table, right in the middle. We had just started seeing each other and agreed to meet in the city. Not a date, not a walk, just to cross paths between errands. I arrived early and waited near the entrance of a shopping center. I saw her from a distance and immediately thought it was her. Same jacket, same walk, same hair. I stepped forward, smiled, and hugged her. Not aggressively, not weird, just a normal hug, the kind people give when they've already hugged before. She froze. Instantly. I pulled back, and that's when I realized this wasn't her. Not at all. A completely different girl. Just similar. And she was looking at me like she was deciding whether to scream. I started apologizing immediately. Too fast. Too much. Said I got confused, that I was really sorry, that it was awkward. She stayed silent. Then she said that it was her wedding day. And here I was, a stranger who had just hugged her at the entrance. I stepped back, apologizing again, basically trying to disappear. And that's when I heard a voice behind me. It was her. The real one. She walked up at the exact moment I was hugging someone else's bride. She looked at me, then at the girl, then back at me, and said that apparently I was a very friendly person. I had no idea what to say. We did meet. But after that moment, it didn't really matter how the day went. Because first impressions tend to last forever.